All right, getting into research and gap analysis. And of all of the areas of oral history interviews, the entire cycle, this area is usually forgotten or short-sighted the most. So if you have time to be intentional about creating an oral history project moving forward, this is definitely a big part of what I would like you to spend some thought and time on. So the first part is just considering the topic, right? Usually when we sit down as professionals, we don't say, oh, I want to do an oral history and have no idea what it is that we actually want to interview for. Oftentimes, conducting this oral history interview or interviews is because there's some sort of topic, project, research going on that necessitates doing these interviews. So, with that in mind, when we consider a topic, I want you to also think about what is the mission of your institution. When we're doing oral history interviews housed at an institution, it's usually not just to like go out and just speak to anybody, like whatever you want. Resources are tight, your time and capacity is often limited, and we want to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing project wise, oral history or not, is in alignment with the mission of your particular institution. Next, what are the collecting priorities? So, if you're in charge of the archives, museum, cultural heritage organization, whatever type of collection it is that you are in charge of, what sort of collections do you have and or would be appropriate for your type of collection? This helps to inform what sort of oral history interviews and topics you need to focus on over others. Then, what is the intended output or use? So, again, being very intentional and thinking about what, if you do go out and do these oral history interviews, what's the point? Like, what is the why of you doing those interviews? Sometimes it can be because there's a particular exhibition coming up, and the exhibition focus could use help filling in gaps with some wonderful and rich oral history interviews. Other times there may be some research work that needs to go into a particular topic or historical site. And so with that, there's the intention and focus. So have those in mind as well in terms of when you think about oral history interviews, in addition to being in alignment with mission and in scope for your collection, is the output or intended use also something that makes sense for you to do? And then finally, are there historical events, organizations, or other memories that are at risk of being lost when a generation passes away? For many of our organizations, and just for us as human beings in general, there are going to be markers in time as we reach them where looking back on a particular event or looking back on a particular generation's experience is incredibly important to capture before that link is lost and all we have is the written or visual records. So thinking about that as sort of that final piece and external to your institution typically is what are some of the celebrations, memorials, historical events, etc., that need to be captured. All right, once you've done some of that intentional and strategic thinking, the next part to this is going to be the research part. So, researching what exists in your home organization is a great first place to start. This helps you to identify any gaps that are within your specific collection. The next and most obvious one after your organization is going to be any sort of peer organizations. And by what I mean by peer organizations is museums or archives or whomever that have similar type collections to you who may be covering similar topics or geographic area. So if there's a gap in your collection and a gap in theirs, then this is a critical gap to the historical record as a whole. And then, of course, just checking in on national organizations and any other perhaps unconventional organizations that could have their own oral history interviews or other archival or museum type materials that fit with what you're looking for. You will be surprised what makes it out to other organizations that may seem like, oh, this type of material or topic would only ever be in this particular historical society. when in fact there are things that find themselves across the country or in national depository. Um, also checking in with your community archives or community programs where they may not be formalized as cultural memory workers or as a community archive, but still have their own recorded interviews and stories that may fit in well to the narrative that you're trying to capture, and wanting to make sure you're not duplicating that work. And then, of course, review available materials on the topic to hone in on where your oral history project can help contribute. So, being intentional and strategic, continuing that through line, making sure that you're not stepping on toes or reinventing the wheel, because nobody's happy when that happens. And that what work you're doing is work that is going to help contribute and fill in gaps, versus causing any other sort of harm or duplicative work. So, gap analysis. Where are the gaps in your collection? And then thinking about where are the excluded voices or missing perspectives. Now, for all of our institutions, no matter what size or how long you've been around, there are going to be gaps. And for many of us, just the history of how we've collected as museums, as archives, we know that it has not been a perfect history of collections. So, trying to be more proactive about bringing in those excluded voices and missing perspectives, because those are the obvious gaps for our collections currently. And then where are there gaps in the historical record across all record keeping facilities? So thinking about both peer and national organizations related to the particular topic we're focusing on, and also thinking about the other types of historical records, whether it's documents, photographs, audiovisual material. Where are there gaps in those types of records where an oral history interview could help fill in and provide some additional historical context and valuable information?